Stone, coming to you again from my vertical mattress behind me. So, as many of you are aware, yesterday was Easter, the embodiment of the hope that we have as Christians. So, of course, I was going to pick a verse that was referencing that in some form. So, I had in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 22, verse 20 to 22. But in fact, Christ has been raised from the dead, the first fruits of those who have fallen asleep. For as by a man came death, by a man has come also the resurrection of the dead. For as in Adam all die, so also in Christ shall all be made alive. So, for the two of you that have sung Handel's Messiah, these verses are used in probably one of my favorite movements of that. It really captures the duality at play in that. It's a lot of kind of like somber into just kind of an excited movement, going from as in Adam all die, but also the resurrection of Jesus. So, yeah. But I really like the literary work done by Paul. Uh, and I know like we like to kind of box the Bible into how is this applicable, and it is. Uh, but I do want to just kind of take like a slight tangent to just like appreciate just like how well built the story is in the Bible, like the story from beginning to end. So, what Paul's doing right here, comparing Jesus and Adam. I think later in 1 Corinthians or maybe 2 Corinthians, Paul even refers to Jesus as a second Adam. Uh, Adam, where he's the one that kind of brought sin into the world, and Jesus is the one that makes the power of sin leave the world. I mean, obviously, there's still sin and everything, but it's Jesus overcoming that so that we can also overcome that. So in the last couple of weeks, I've talked a lot about the hope that we have through Jesus because of what he did for us on the cross. But the section points to so much more than that, just kind of as Paul was talking about. God didn't just set the world in motion and then sprinkle in a couple prophets, see that none of that was really sticking. So he just kind of went like all in with Jesus and kind of like hedged his bets. Which is maybe not the right term to use there, but I think all in is, I digress. So, yeah, like I was saying, he didn't just kind of like decide this, like, oh, nothing's working, I guess I gotta do this now. There was a plan ahead of all of that. The whole point of the sacrifice in the Old Testament that everyone does, the atonements like Pastor Wade was talking about, they're temporary fixes. They're not meant to be, let's do this for the rest of our, not our lives, but like generations in the future. It all points to what Jesus is going to do in fulfilling God's promise. So if any of you guys remember Pete Barry, he was an old middle school leader from maybe like 10 years ago now, which maybe Aaron remembers, but probably not many of you. But he had this really passionate breakdown of this kind of same idea that has always stuck with me, more so than anything I think I remember him saying. But he was talking about how the story of the Bible, like when you really take it as a whole, it shows how everything connects. So like it leads with when God creates the earth and creates Adam. Adam is said to have like dominion over the animals, dominion over the earth. But then you kind of see that leave him as he sins and sin enters. And you can see things throughout the Old Testament of things always kind of working against Israel and God always being there to protect them. But you get to Jesus' life when Jesus is in the wilderness and Satan is tempting him. And he's talking about how he has dominion of these things and he can offer these things to Jesus, which Pete connected as because what Adam gave up in sinning, he gave over to Satan. And then Jesus dies on the cross, comes back, and then from then on, the tense and the ownership he uses is that he now has dominion. Obviously, it's more complicated than that. And Jesus and God was in control the whole time. But it's that very thing that when you just read the book of Genesis or the Old Testament, or just read the New Testament, or just read the Easter story, while yes, there's stories in there that you can take as an individual story, there's so much more to get from it when you can take it as this whole thing. Because it's not just God stepping in every once in a while with this new idea for how he's going to help everyone. It's this overarching plan that he's had the entire time, and everything from the beginning points to the end, and everything in the end points to the beginning, and how it's just this massive story. So, if I can find where I am in my notes. Uh, so, so the fact that that happens, and the fact that God inspired all of this to be written, just shows like how powerful that plan is, how powerful the story is that God put into motion, kept in motion, and continues to keep in motion. Uh, and Paul really just captures that in like a concise way. Uh, there's some of the literary side of that, but how does that kind of play into us? How does Easter and God's plan all kind of work into that? I mean, obvious in some ways, but it's easy for us to look at the present, uh, what's happening right now, whether it's good or bad for you. What's happening now is what's important. Is God going to get me through this? Is God going to just help me through this one thing right now? But I think one of the greatest things about God, I mean, obviously that he loves us and he created everything and all that stuff, but that he doesn't just have a plan for today or a plan for tomorrow. It's that in each and every one of our lives, God had a plan yesterday, from the day you were born, to today, to tomorrow, to eternity in your life. And if you're just looking at today's page and that's all you can really focus on, that you forget about everything he's done so far in your life and can even maybe distract you from what he's going to continue doing in your life. Because it's just incredible to be able to look at your life so far. I know many of you are in middle school, high school, the leaders watch it, anyone else that watches this. Anywhere you are in your life, you can look back and just see how much God has done and just know that he will continue doing that for all of us.